lembrado até hoje. Essa é a grande dúvida que cerca o mito Nostradamus. Ele fez previsões com uma precisão extraordinária, mas até hoje é difícil dizer com certeza quem ele era e o que realmente ele escreveu. O legado de Nostradamus permite muitas leituras e interpretações, que algumas vezes são utilizadas de forma errônea, causando pânico entre os mais sensíveis. Conheça o Verdadeiro Nostradamus no documentário que o GNT exibe agora.
Em 1549, Michel de Nostradamus, um médico francês, começou a escrever profecias sobre o futuro da humanidade. Será que esse homem era um verdadeiro profeta, cujas visões revelaram eventos históricos dos últimos 500 anos? Se ele era, será que devemos temer o que ele escreveu sobre o nosso futuro?
Mourns, the world grieves. The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead.
If there was nothing to this man at all, would he have survived as long as he has? What is it that has fascinated so many people for so long? We are all of us anxious to know what's going to happen. And when an apparent prophet like Nostradamus has accurately forecast the rise of Hitler and the Nazis and the assassination of JFK, I think that thinking men and women are going to look to see what he says for July of 1999.
In the year 1999 and 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror. He will bring to life the great king of the Mongols. Before and after, war reigns supreme.
All his prophecies are now about to culminate in the grand prophecy of this year. He was anticipating a grand conflict. A very bloody sacrifice would take place on the fields of Europe, and that date was given as July of this year. All his prophecies, I feel, add up to this date being the very climax of history.
Alguns vêm ao Speaker's Corner para rir daqueles que falam sobre o fim do mundo e sobre o dia do juízo final. Por ser pastor da igreja anglicana, não posso fazer isso. Os profetas do Antigo Testamento previram o futuro, incluindo a destruição de Jerusalém, o que realmente aconteceu. O último livro do Novo Testamento, o Apocalipse, diz como será o início do final dos tempos com a chegada do Anticristo.
My friends, to quote Nostradamus, the rivers will run red with blood.
Existiram outros profetas desde os tempos bíblicos que previram o fim do mundo. Mas o que torna Nostradamus diferente é a sua extraordinária capacidade de ter acertado tantas vezes. Devido ao estado em que o mundo se encontra, não é surpresa o fato de as pessoas levarem suas previsões sobre o final dos tempos tão a sério.
You're gonna die, and nothing's gonna benefit you. You're gonna stand before your Creator face to face.
To defy God, Lord, we got to stand the consequence someday.
Estou começando a minha jornada para conhecer o verdadeiro Nostradamus, viajando para o sul da França, para uma cidade na Provença, onde ele escreveu as suas profecias. Quanto mais penso sobre ele, mais intrigado fico. Outros grandes profetas da história fizeram apenas previsões gerais sobre as pessoas e sobre a época em que viviam. Nostradamus foi o único a fazer profecias que atravessaram séculos e o único que previu eventos com uma precisão extraordinária.
Beasts wild with hunger will cross the rivers. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hitler. He will drag the leader in a cage of iron when the child of Germany observes no law. Wicked and vile, a man of ill repute, the tyrant of Iraq comes in apace. With Babylon's great horde all plead their suit. Horrid the land shall be and black its face.
É difícil acreditar que alguém há quase 5 séculos tenha previsto com tanta precisão figuras e eventos importantes da história. E as palavras dele realmente parecem fazer muito sentido. Eu precisava conhecer melhor o homem e entender o lugar e a época em que ele vivia.
People at the time were convinced they were living at the end of the world. Not only were they entering the middle ice age, weather was awful, people were dying of starvation and plague and poverty and war, enormous wars going on. The Protestants were fighting the Catholics. There were thousands of German horsemen being invited in who were ravaging the east of France. So you had, you know, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, basically. And as far as the Catholics were concerned, you had Calvin sitting there in Geneva. He was the Antichrist. So here was the end of the world. Naturally, they wanted to know what's going to happen next. In those sort of circumstances, people do turn to prophecy. It's happening now in Japan. Almost anything gets believed when things are threatening.
Membros de seitas suicidas e os que acreditam no fim do mundo peregrinam até Salom. Eu soube que muitas pessoas do local são irracíveis com relação a Nostradamus e a sua associação com o final dos tempos. E quando o mês de sua previsão mais famosa se aproximava, eu perguntei às pessoas da cidade se estavam mais nervosas em relação ao que poderia estar prestes a acontecer.
This is a very nice hotel. I'm glad I've come to stay with you.
Oh, thanks. You are here for business, for pleasure?
I'm here for business.
A lenda de Nostradamus parece crescer mais a cada ano, conforme suas previsões aparentam estar se tornando realidade. Novas traduções e comentários são feitos a toda hora, e isso tem gerado muitos mitos e falácias em torno desse profeta. Não é fácil saber quem ele realmente era e o que ele verdadeiramente escreveu. Parece que Nostradamus colocou a cidade no mapa. Há turistas do mundo todo atraídos pelo fato de que o grande profeta viveu e escreveu aqui. Salom está claramente obtendo progresso por causa de seu filho mais famoso, e o único aspecto negativo são as seitas suicidas.
Welcome to the House of Nostradamus. You're in the building which was the home from 1547 until his death in 1566 of Nostradamus, the star-loving doctor, as he liked to call himself.
Michel de Nostradamus was basically a doctor. His early training was as a doctor. In fact, he acted as an apothecary before that, a chemist, if you like. He trained as a doctor at Montpellier and specialized in the plague, which was quite a brave thing to do. It suggests he was somebody who had the courage to go into the dark things and then out the other side, so to speak. He was pushed to consider the more troubling side of his nature by the events that happened to him at Agen, which was where he first set up as a doctor and where his wife Henriette d'Ancos and their 2 children died of the plague. So there were quite a lot of circumstances which may have led him to a sort of crisis at about that time. And he then goes off wandering, disappears. We don't know where he went. He said he wanders through various countries and lands. And eventually he went into semi-retirement in his 40s. He settled down at Salon de Provence and started trying to write the history of, or the future history of the world.
O que fez Nostradamus se isolar? Que tipo de crise ele enfrentou? Ele vivia em um grande período da Renascença, em que havia uma explosão de novas descobertas, o que eu acho pode tê-lo levado a crer que poderia dominar as doenças da época. Porém, isso não foi possível. A peste continuava a reclamar a vida de milhares de pessoas, e ele perdeu a sua esposa e seus 2 filhos para essa doença. O impacto disso deve ter sido devastador. Posso compreender por que ele questionou a sua fé na ciência e na religião tradicional e começou a procurar respostas em outros lugares, na astrologia e nas ciências ocultas. Enquanto Nostradamus se aprofundava nas áreas mais obscuras do conhecimento, ele era visto pelas pessoas de Salon com um certo medo e desconfiança. Era uma época em que a Inquisição ainda atuava e ele corria o risco de morrer queimado na fogueira. Mas Nostradamus caiu nas graças da rainha da França, Catarina de Médici, que era fascinada pelo ocultismo. O marido da rainha, o rei Henrique II, foi tragicamente assassinado em um combate. Nostradamus previu a terrível morte do rei com espantosa exatidão.
The younger lion shall surmount the old, on martial field in duel man to man. Twice challenged, thrice eyes pierced in cage of gold. Death shall come hard as only dying can.
Assim, a sua fama estava garantida e seu futuro seguro. Ele dedicou o resto de seus dias à profecia. Foi no final da sua vida, em seu último livro de previsões, que ele escreveu o verso 72, O Rei do Terror. Nessa quadra, Nostradamus revelou o que poderia acontecer no 7º mês de 1999.
Aguarde só um pouquinho e veja como algumas previsões de Nostradamus foram confirmadas séculos após sua morte. E mais, a discussão sobre o método de trabalho do profeta. Nós voltamos depois do intervalo.
Nostradamus não foi o primeiro a prever o dia do juízo final, mas suas profecias do fim do mundo são assustadoras porque citam datas específicas. Algumas previsões descrevem eventos exclusivos, como a morte de Henrique II, enquanto outras detalham grandes mudanças no poder político.
And it shall be in the month of October that some great upheaval shall occur. There shall be extreme changes and transformations of kingdoms, and it shall remain so for no more than 73 years and 7 months.
Nostradamus describes how there'll be a huge transfer of power in October, which shall last for 73 years and 7 months. Now that sounds suspiciously like the Russian Revolution, and in fact 73 years and 7 months was precisely what it lasted, collapsing in the summer of 1991. And he says, and then people who had moved to the left thinking to free themselves will move to the right. Well, that seems to fit. And he says at the same time there will be somebody from the 50th degree of latitude who will renew the entire Catholic Church. And of course John Paul II, who had quite a role in this whole thing, came from Krakow, which is on the 50th degree of latitude. So I find that pretty impressive. He was normally very precise on his latitudes, and he seems to have hit the bullseye on that occasion.
Mas como ele fazia isso? Sabemos que ele baseava grande parte do seu trabalho na astrologia, acreditando que a posição dos astros causaria um grande efeito na vida da Terra. No século XVI, isso era uma crença comum e não era incompatível com a teologia cristã ou com o pensamento científico.
Astrology was part of daily life in Nostradamus's time. People used the language of it. They talked about people being jovial, that's Jupiter. They talked about them being mercurial, that's the planet Mercury. They saw people in astrological terms. An educated person would seek an astrologer's advice before making a business decision. A general would before planning a campaign, and certainly in medical treatment, a doctor would look at an astrological chart before prescribing anything.
In Nostradamus' time, various things we have to remember. First of all, it was before the age of telescopes. Therefore, we depended entirely upon the naked eye and about the physical nature of the planets, we knew nothing at all. Secondly, also important to remember, in those days, astrology was still regarded as a proper science and equal to astronomy. And I think it's fair to say that all the main astronomers of the day were also astrologers. And certainly that does apply to Nostradamus. Remember, was trained in astronomy. He was an astronomer and also an astrologer, and there was no real distinction between the two.
The idea at the time was that history repeats itself, and if you want to know about the future, you have to find out from the past. All the answers lay in the past at the time of the Renaissance. They hadn't invented the idea of progress. But about that time, people were bringing out astronomical tables, forecasting in which signs the planets would be for centuries ahead. So he had the information, and I think the possibility dawned on him that it might be possible to foretell the future using it. I think probably where it started was with the great lineup of planets of 1524. Everybody expected the world to be flooded. Various people were building arks, quitting the cities, and so on. And I think probably Nostradamus had the wit to look back at the last time all the planets lined up and realize that nothing happened, and probably, being a young and brash young man, probably told everybody, oh, nothing's going to happen, and nothing did. And that may have given him the idea that you could look back to the last time the planets were in certain positions, whether it's a line-up or whether it's higgledy-piggledy, and then work out when they were going to be in those positions again, and from it foretell what was going to happen. You can test that on a computer. You look at, for example, where the planets were at the time of Julius Caesar's assassination. You can project that into the future and see when it's going to happen again. And as it happens again on the 23rd of November 1963 at the latitude of Dallas, which could be just a shot in the dark. But if it's more than a shot in the dark, it's a bit worrying. Somebody has some explaining to do. The ancient work shall its fulfilment meet, from roof shall ruin on the great one fall, an innocent charged of the deadly deed, in woods the culprit hid by misty pall. Does it fit Kennedy? Was it from the roof? An innocent charged of the deadly deed? Well, that remains to be seen. Was the culprit hid by mist, or rather by drizzle, in woods? There had been a rain shower before, and there was the grassy knoll, but again, it remains to be seen.
Nostradamus parece ter usado a astrologia e a natureza cíclica da história para dar a data e a latitude de quando e onde os fatos mais marcantes aconteceriam. Mas se era um método científico tão simples assim, por que outros grandes astrólogos não fizeram o mesmo? Posso imaginar como a astrologia seria capaz de dizer que um evento similar, como um assassinato, poderia acontecer novamente, mas não entendo como podiam prever os detalhes com tanta exatidão.
I think too much has been made of the astrological content of Nostradamus' prophecies, because I think we can find similarities to what Nostradamus did in people working now. And I think the similarities lie really in people who undertake automatic writing, people who believe they're psychic, people who believe they're inspired by God. Because although there's a lot of material about astrology, essentially he was also talking about divine inspiration.
But the perfect appreciation of things cannot be acquired without that divine inspiration. Given that all prophetic inspiration takes its prime moving principle, first from God the Creator, then from fortune and instinct. It is in this way that the prophecy is partially arrived at.
Todas as noites, Nostradamus ia para um quarto secreto em sua casa, onde realizava rituais antigos, entrando em uma espécie de transe para libertar a sua mente dos problemas diários. Não se sabe qual era a técnica exata que ele usava para entrar em transe. Os peritos acham que Nostradamus utilizava um método em que olhava através da chama de uma vela dentro de uma bacia de água durante horas a fio, até as visões aparecerem. Alguns videntes de hoje usam espelhos.
We'll see what there is in the mirror to be seen. When the mists clear off of it, there's usually some kind of picture that I can see. You might not necessarily see it yourself, but I can assure you I'll be able to see it. What I'm seeing isn't a very pleasant picture, actually. This is a hospital. People are being taken out of the hospital, not into it. It must have been hit with a bomb. And unfortunately there's a lot of young children. I had to take that picture away. I should say today's the 18th of May in case this comes up in the future. It's the morning of the 18th of May. Oh, that's a better picture.
Dois dias depois, uma bomba da OTAN atingiu um hospital em Belgrado. Como em todas as profecias, é difícil saber se foi mera coincidência ou uma previsão verdadeira.
Nostradamus used a lot of methods, actually. His prime method of prognostication was scrying. But I would think he had a good working knowledge of black magic. He was an astrologer. So in order to learn black magic, you have to learn white magic first. You go through all the different forms of ritual, or the festivals, or the different ways of using herbs. All of this comes under white magic. And having become what they call an adept at white magic, you can then move on and learn black magic, which involves putting certain protections in place in order that whatever it is you're doing doesn't rebound back onto you.
Quanto mais Nostradamus se aprofundava no lado negro, mais ele se colocava contra a igreja. O Papa dizia que a igreja era a única intérprete da vontade de Deus. Algumas pessoas acreditavam ter uma ligação direta com o divino, o que era uma ameaça, demonstrava que tais pessoas tinham parte com o mal.
Occult is one of those buzzwords that causes a lot of fear in people not in the know. They imagine all kinds of cavalcades of perversion. Cult really means hidden. It's nothing you should be afraid of. I myself and my colleagues have nothing to do with devil worship. The devil is a Christian icon and I'm not a Christian. I look at a cult as more of a kind of strange science, if you will, a fringe science. Nostradamus, because he was an occultist, is also looked on with dread.
Most of the time he was on his own at night, through the night, looking singularly at you know, water or the crystal into a bright light that would reveal what mankind would get up to over the centuries. You have to be careful. You have to trust implicitly your guides and the angels from God. And if you trust them, they won't let you down, so they can't lead you into any danger or falseness. I've worked with my guides for 25 years plus, and before that they were talking to me all the time. So it's a way of life, and if you do it with the right state of mind, you've got nothing to fear.
Começo a imaginar o quanto Nostradamus se deixou envolver pelo ocultismo e quanto controle ele tinha sobre o que escreveu. O que o fez continuar escrevendo essas visões? Será que estava à beira da loucura? Será que ele temia que a Inquisição pudesse bater à sua porta a qualquer momento? Talvez isso explique por que há tanta falta de clareza no trabalho dele. E por haver tanta obscuridade, é possível interpretar as quadras de modo que elas signifiquem o que você desejar. Isso expôs Nostradamus a todo tipo de exploração por parte daqueles que queriam usar a reputação dele de grande profeta para atender às suas necessidades.
eigene Beharrlichkeit, dann werden wir wieder emporsteigen, genau wie die Väter einst auf Deutschland nicht des Geschenk erhielten, sondern selbst den Schatz.
Nostradamus has been used throughout history to justify, especially politicians' aims. Hitler was into it to an extent, although that started with Frau Goebbels, who noticed various similarities in the prophecies to German history. The Germans certainly dropped leaflets over France that Nostradamus had predicted the victory of Germany. The British certainly leafleted occupied Europe with fake prophecies from Nostradamus saying the Germans would be destroyed. And the Americans, of course, no less than MGM, actually put out a film alleging the victory of the Allies and so on. Once again, they falsified the verses they used. It's a standard practice.
Peter Lemesurier é dos poucos que estudaram a primeira edição original das profecias de Nostradamus. Ele acredita que encontrou a verdade por trás de uma das previsões mais infames do grande profeta.
Verse 2:24, what immediately attracts the commentators is the word Hister in line 2, which so often is supposed to mean Hitler. And yet you can see that the whole verse is about Fluve in the first line, meaning rivers. And it mentions Hister, which was the old word for the Danube. It mentions Rhein, which was the old word for the Rhine. So, whatever it's not about Hitler, it is about rivers. And a suitable translation would be, beasts wild with hunger shall the rivers ford, the greater battle near the Danube swell. In iron cage he'll have them drag the Lord, when German child the Rhine shall see as well. Now, it's not very specific about Hitler, if indeed it's Hitler at all. .
Minha missão na França terminou na igreja de São Lourenço, onde Nostradamus foi sepultado. Agora, depois de tê-lo conhecido melhor, imagino se ele teria acreditado que depois de mais de 400 anos, uma de suas profecias ainda influenciaria tantas pessoas.
Requiescat in pace, in nomine Patri, et Filiis, et Spiritus Sanctus, Nostradamus. Amen.
No seu epitáfio, a esposa de Nostradamus pede que não perturbemos o descanso dele. Acho que seus ossos podem descansar, mas acho que o nome dele nunca poderá fazer isso.
A interpretação de um texto, séculos depois de ter sido escrito, é difícil e requer um dedicado trabalho de pesquisa. O legado de Nostradamus foi bem interpretado? O profeta realmente previu a data do fim do mundo? Você vai saber as respostas para essas questões na terceira parte do documentário O Verdadeiro Nostradamus, depois do intervalo.
Shoko Asahara é o líder da seita Verdade Suprema. Ele ordenou o atentado fatal em 1995 com o gás sarin no metrô de Tóquio. 12 pessoas morreram e 5.500 ficaram feridas. Asahara acreditava que Nostradamus tinha previsto que ele seria o líder de uma grande seita. Asahara foi à França em 1989 em um tipo de peregrinação para ver os textos originais de Nostradamus com os próprios olhos.
Et donc lorsque je l'ai rencontré à Lyon, il venait d'abord se documenter et puis en même temps poser des questions pour savoir si Nostradamus l'avait prédit dans ses prophéties. J'ai eu un mal fou à expliquer que Nostradamus avait une connaissance du monde au XVIe siècle, en tout cas en 1555, plutôt plus que limitée, d'une part, et que deuxièmement, l'idée que j'ai du fonctionnement et de l'interprétation éventuelle des prophéties n'est pas du tout celle que Shoko Asahara voulait entendre. Et disons que pour faire simple et court, on s'est plutôt quitté plus ou moins fâché parce qu'il avait été déçu que je ne lui dise pas que Nostradamus avait prévu l'arrivée de Shoko Asahara et éventuellement que Shoko Asahara soit à l'origine de la fin du monde.
As mídias europeia e japonesa atacaram Michel Chamorro, questionando-o sobre seu encontro com Asahara.
Lorsque j'ai appris l'attentat du métro de Tokyo en avril 1995, je me suis senti quand même un peu responsable. Et je me suis senti aussi responsable de la réflexion que je peux avoir sur Nostradamus. Je me suis dit que bon, Nostradamus, c'est finalement un sujet très difficile, qui ne peut pas être mis entre toutes les mains. La preuve, c'est qu'on peut le détourner à des fins criminelles.
Nostradamus sempre atraiu pessoas que vivem períodos de grande incerteza. E em 1999, o Japão enfrentava uma onda de instabilidade econômica e social. Muitos japoneses ficaram obcecados com uma quadra sobre o fim do mundo atribuída a Nostradamus. E eles acreditavam que o final dos tempos seria em 4 de julho de 1999.
People are always worried by uncertainty. So you get the current idiocies going on in Japan. To the effect that verse 158 is predicting World War III on July the 4th, and so on and so forth. My translation of that verse reads, "The belly sliced, it shall be born two-headed, and with 4 arms. 4 whole years it shall live. When Aquilea's festival is readied, Turin, Fossana follow Ferrara's chief. And you can see perfectly well that if you do a proper translation, A, there's nothing about war in it. The belly slice is a caesarean birth. This two-headed four-armed thing is obviously Siamese twins. And it's Aquileia's festival. It's a town in Italy. It's not Aquila, which means the eagle. And it doesn't therefore mean that it's about the United States because the United States has the eagle as its emblem, because of course dozens of other places do. So it doesn't apply to July the 4th. It's a typical example of somebody who doesn't know, probably doesn't know French at all, but certainly doesn't know 16th century French, feeding a wrong idea into the verse, this corresponding with everybody's favourite fears, and the whole thing getting blown out of proportion until you get a whole nation like Japan going crazy about the idea.
Muitos europeus também consultam as palavras de Nostradamus. O conflito nos Balcãs tinha o potencial de colocar em atrito superpotências como a China e a Rússia. As pessoas temiam que esse seria o começo da Terceira Guerra Mundial, do Armagedon.
Everyone becomes very worried reading Nostradamus prophecies and knowing that not only there is a conflict in Kosovo, including all major powers in the world, but also conflict in Kashmir in the last couple of days, which includes two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan as well. We have Nostradamus prophecies reprinted now in Serbia. They are sold in bookshops, and most of people are now more and more worried about Nostradamus prophecies regarding July of 1999 as the beginning of great world crisis.
Here's one comment that will change your life, my friends. It's this.
Havia pessoas na Inglaterra tentando alertar os outros com relação à profecia de Nostradamus sobre a vinda do rei de terror.
In 1999 and 7 months, there shall come from the sky a great king of terror to bring back to life the king of the Mongols. And Mars shall reign.
Não posso deixar de ficar preocupado e ansioso com o efeito que essas profecias sobre o fim do mundo, esses avisos constantes sobre a chegada do anticristo e sobre todos os desastres que estão por vir, exercem nos ouvintes mais sensíveis e vulneráveis.
Heavy on sensitive and vulnerable listeners. If the words of Nostradamus, or for that matter of the Bible or any other prophecy, are misunderstood, it can lead to tragedy, it can change people's lives for the worse.
Desde que Nostradamus escreveu suas previsões sobre o fim do mundo, 11 dias foram acrescentados ao nosso calendário. Por isso, algumas pessoas achavam que o fim do mundo seria em 11 de agosto, no dia do eclipse solar.
So I worked in the civil service for 35 years at the Department of Education. I retired, got early bath in 94, and since then I've been thinking a lot about things that are more important than the trivial round of common task. I've studied various good books, the Bible of course, the Quran, Nostradamus, and I'm convinced beyond any doubt that we're moving towards the end of time, the appointed moment of judgment, and in the twinkle of an eye, all of us will be in one place or the other 1 second later. Just like that. And 1 moment later, everyone, from Adam to the children unborn even at this moment, will 1 second later be in one place or the other. Come the 10th of August, the day before the 11th, I shall finally leave this flat for the very last time, and it will go up in smoke like the rest of the planet the next day. I shall go back to where I belong in Sussex, lock the door behind me, although I don't need to, the good Lord will protect the flat. I shall get the minibus to the station, the tube or the bus to Victoria, the train from Victoria to Lewis, up to the hotel in Lewis, where I shall check in overnight and virtually spend my last day where I started my first day 56 plus years ago. Await the appointed moment when our Maker will finally intervene and call his chosen in. Enjoy the games, boys, but some of them are never going to end.
Para muitas pessoas, o fim do mundo tem um certo encanto. Tradicionalmente, ele oferece consolo e medo. Oferece a liberdade, a ressurreição dos mortos e o encontro com nossos parentes falecidos. Acho que isso confirma por que tantos querem acreditar na profecia do fim do mundo.
If you look at the way people function now, it's largely in the absence of religion, it's in the absence of simple belief. People don't trust their priests and their vicars very much anymore. But you can pick up a book that says things that are in a way comforting, or at least certain, then maybe that's a fair substitute. And I do think that's a substantial part of the appeal of this. It's consequently you're suspending reason to an extent again. You don't have to look very far. You just look at the words, you just look at what's said there, and you accept that for what it is, which is for a long time the way many people have accepted religion. If you think much further and look much deeper, then obviously you get different answers.
I'm afraid it is irresponsible for authors to feed ideas into Nostradamus and then put it out that is what Nostradamus says. I mean, it's dangerous. It's feeding ideas into people's minds. Prophecies can be self-fulfilling. This is the danger. You really need to get back to the original edition, which most people don't, and then you need some fairly level-headed commentaries on it. Otherwise the whole thing gathers its own momentum.
If you look at the internet, if you look at the huge number of sites that mention Nostradamus, that include material, it looks like people believe in what he said. You actually start analysing it and you realise you've got as many different views and as many different interpretations as there are sites that deal with him. And similarly, if you pick up an array of books, we've got books here, these people, if you put them all in the same room, the author of these books, they wouldn't hardly agree on anything. They could slog it out from dusk till dawn.
The King of Terror could refer to a nuclear bomb going off in the sky. That is a very strong possibility.
The King of Terror, Slobodan Milosevic, wants to impose himself.
Just recently, scientists have found out about the grand belt of asteroids that are now circling the Earth.
I have to explain. The chief of terror is China.
We see also the possibility of a rogue satellite such as Cassini crashing to Earth.
Nostradamus predicted that a great king of terror would appear. He was really speaking about the Antichrist.
What you end up doing over a period of time or over a number of different writers and interpreters is interpreting the same quatrain, the same same little prophecy, as meaning 4 or 5 different things depending when it was made and when it was interpreted. So really there is no absolute test. There's only the test of looking back, comparing the prophecies and finding out really that they're all about how people have interpreted them and really not about how Nostradamus intended them at all.
I have to explain. The chief of terror
referred to a nuclear bomb going off in the sky. That's a very strong possibility.
That a great king of terror would appear.
A comet appearing in the sky.
Slobodan Milosevic,
or one rogue satellite such as Cassini.
Eu vi tantas interpretações diferentes de Nostradamus que tinha de recorrer ao texto original em francês do século XVI. Em Gales, Peter Le Mesurier poderia ter a interpretação definitiva do Rei do Terror.
L'an 1999, 7 mois, du ciel viendra un grand roi défrayeur, ressusciter le grand roi d'Anglemois, avant-après, Mars régné par bonheur. Right, Lionel, this is the famous verse, this is the nitty-gritty, it's 1072. It says when in the first line, the year 1999 and 7 months, July on his calendar, mid-July to mid-August on ours. Funnily enough, including the 11th of August solar eclipse. Du ciel viendra un grand roi défrayeur. Now here it is, the great king défrayeur. Now the big thing is this grand roi défrayeur, because although this is the original 1568 edition, it wasn't very long before an apostrophe was being put in there. That's where it wouldn't be. so that it meant un grand roi d'effrayeur, a great king of terror. And that is the one that has persisted ever since, and now people are expecting a great king of terror, and people are building bomb-proof shelters and worrying about this comet that's going to hit us. In fact, it doesn't say a great king of terror at all.
So it's just that one apostrophe, Peter?
Just that one apostrophe.
That's changed him from a defrayer, from a payer of expenses,
right,
to a figure of terror.
That's it. This is, it's ludicrous. But then, of course, you know, just a slight change can change God into dog.
I really look forward to, particularly after July, or maybe the end of August to be on the safe side with the changing calendars, when we can be sure that no great king of terror has come from the sky. And I'll be even happier come the first day of 2000, when absolutely nothing has happened and we can all get on with our lives.
As far as the end of the world is concerned, there are various ideas as to when it might happen, but none of them actually based on Nostradamus, because he never mentioned the idea. But you could say 3797, since that's when his prophecies run out, and he says his prophecies are the history of the world, but there's nothing specific in that. Can we all sleep easy tonight, knowing that tomorrow is July the 4th? As far as Nostradamus is concerned, yes, of course you can. But, of course, there is no telling what is going to happen to any of us. And it's on that sort of imponderability that the whole attraction of Nostradamus depends.
Então, mero apóstrofo enganou tantas pessoas por tanto tempo. Agora, depois de separar a verdade do mito, não posso classificar Nostradamus como charlatão. Na verdade, acho que ele era visionário. Sua profecia sobre o comunismo, por exemplo, foi tão exata que não pode ser considerada pura coincidência. Com ou sem apóstrofo, algumas pessoas ainda estão convencidas de que o fim está próximo.
I'm coming back here to Lewis because I want to finish my days and be judged accordingly, as near as I can to when I entered the world at 5:20 on the 16th of September 1942 AD, another Wednesday. And I'm not a Wednesday's child, and I'm certainly not full of woe. Quite the opposite. There have been prophets down the ages, ignored. Some have been persecuted, at least I'm spared that, but there have been them. Some in the Old Testament, Daniel, John the Baptist. Nostradamus is a prophet. I'm a prophet. I've been called by God to prepare for the end of time. All I've done is add the time to the true prophets before me. God bless you.